Inherited IRA Rollover Rules. Hey everyone, Adam Bergman here, tax attorney and founder of IRA Financial. On today's AdBits, I should say, going to discuss how the Inherited IRA Rollover Rules work. And they're actually, quite simple. So let me just set the agenda of today's podcast. First, we'll talk about what is an inherited IRA and the different types of inherited IRAs. And ultimately, we'll chat about what you can do if you receive an inherited IRA. So let's get started. As the name suggests, an inherited IRA means that, unfortunately, someone has passed away who has had an IRA, whether it was a traditional, Roth, SEP, simple, and you have been designated a beneficiary. Now, generally, when someone has an IRA, they have the ability to designate a primary and a contingent beneficiary or secondary. A primary is generally a spouse, which is the first person or persons, because you can have multiple primaries, right? It could be your 50%, let's say you don't have a spouse, right? 2 kids, 50% to your son, 50% to your daughter. Most people, if they have a spouse, will leave 100% primary to your spouse. In fact, if you want to designate someone other than your spouse, and in some cases, you'll need your spouse's consent to basically acknowledge that they will not be deemed or designated a primary beneficiary. But ultimately, that's probably the most tax efficient way, because under the new requirement of distribution rules, if you leave it to your kids or grandkids, they may have a 10-year window, and there could be tax implications where if you leave it to a spouse, he or she can move it into an IRA in their name, and there would not generally be immediate tax depending on their age. So generally, as I mentioned, when you are designated a beneficiary, you're generally a primary or a secondary. The secondary means if the primary is no longer alive, then obviously it kicks up to the primary. You generally have a primary and secondary because, God forbid, there's a horrific accident and multiple people are unfortunately lose their lives at the same time. You want to make sure there's someone there, because if not, you deal with probate, and you don't want to do that. So different types of inherited IRAs is spousal, as I mentioned, which generally you just put the IRA in your name, right? If your spouse dies, God forbid, then his or her IRA will just be put in your name, non-taxable event. The IRA is part of the overall estate, but it's about a $12 million uniform lifetime exemption. And then there's the non-spousal inherited IRAs. So the non-spousal inherited IRAs, you can't put in your name. It's designated as an inherited IRA, and you essentially, under the new RMD rules, have 10 years to pull it out. And there's different, depending on the age of the decedent, on whether you can pull it out, over 10 years or pro rata, and they're still finalizing regs on that, which should be out shortly. But for purposes of today's podcast, no, if you have a spousal IRA inherited, you just move it into your own traditional IRA, and then you have all the same rollover rules. You can move it to a SEP, you could convert it to a Roth, you could move it to a 401k. The same rollover rules would apply as if it was your IRA. The difference is if you have a non-spousal inherited IRA, you're essentially stuck in that universe. You cannot convert to Roth. You cannot move to a 401k. You're essentially stuck in the traditional IRA, right? Because even if you get an inherited IRA from a SEP, generally you're going to roll it into an inherited traditional IRA because you're most likely not an employee of the SEP adopted business. So in almost all cases, the non-spousal inherited IRAs are traditional IRAs. And generally, as I mentioned, there's 10-year distribution rules based off the new RMD rules put forth in Secure Act 1 that was promulgated in December 2019, which they're still actually finalizing regulations. Gotta love the IRS. So that's basically the heart of today's podcast. If it's a spousal inherited IRA, you're free to move it to another IRA, a 401k, or convert it to Roth. It's kind of like your IRA. However, if it's non-spousal IRA, meaning you're designated from a non-spouse, like a parent, child, friend, grandparent, whatever, cousin, then you have more restrictive rules, and you basically have to keep the IRA inherited in that traditional form. You can't convert it to Roth, can't move it to a 401k, can't roll it to a SEP. You're basically stuck, and you generally have about 10 years to pull those funds out. If you're under 18, there's further expanded rules where you don't have to take the money out until you reach the age of 18, and then you'll have to address the 10-year rule. So that's today's podcast. The key is just remembering, number one, is it spousal inherited or non-spousal? If it's non-spousal, then you have more restrictive rules in terms of where you can roll that inherited IRA out to. Basically, it's stuck in the traditional IRA world. Can't convert it, can't move to a 401k, can't move to a SEP. Whereas if it's spousal, you have all the regular rollover rules that would apply to any IRA that you actually had. So there it is. I hope you guys enjoyed today's AdBits. It was a lot of fun. Appreciate you guys hanging out with me today. Leave a comment. Give it a thumbs up. Why not? It's a nice thing to do, right? Doesn't cost you anything. And leave a comment, leave a question. Love to hear from everyone. Hope everyone's summer is going amazing. And I look forward to chatting with everyone again next week. Ciao and take care.